interview promises to be a very interesting one. We have two wonderful people in the studio. They go by the name Sidney and Biola, both communication and etiquette consultants, and Victor and I will make some music together.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We appreciate. Let me start with asking, what is effective communication?
Well, we can hazard a definition. Effective communication would seem to mean being able to pass on a message that will be understood.
Okay.
If the message gets across and is understood, then the communication is effective.
Okay.
Simple as that.
Now, what do you think are the things that hinder effective communication?
That's a very big one. There's so many things that can hinder effective communication. If the level of competence between the sender and the receiver is very wide in terms of gap, competence level, that can affect communication. So if you're very competent and you're talking to someone who's not very competent, that could create a barrier. You're speaking a competent mouth and an incompetent ear, then there'll be a barrier, there'll be a problem. So the level has to be up to a certain level, up to a certain point, and there must be a common ground.
Would that presuppose that for you to effectively communicate, the sender of the message has to find out the level of competence or hearing of the receiver of the message?
Yes, that's why we say know your audience. But there are situations where you don't know your audience, but you must communicate at your level. So in broadcasting, for example, we talk about informing, educating, and entertaining at the same time. We lead the public. So if your level is a little higher than the audience you're communicating to, then there's a tendency for them to have to learn from you. So give or take, you could stay at your level with intent to educate the person you're communicating with. Usually that could be effective too.
How is non-verbal communication a part of effective communication?
Well, it's a big part, very big part. You're not just talking, you're talking with your body as well. And someone who is able to interpret a body language can also understand what you're saying without you actually saying it. Your body language could be different from what you're saying, in which case you're confusing the person you're talking with or talking to.
Now, let's talk about eye contact.
Yes.
Now, people say that is very uncomfortable. It's important.
Yes.
But it can be very uncomfortable, especially in these parts where you're not supposed to look somebody in the overview or anything. How do we manage these barriers caused by tradition, culture?
Well, society is, largely what I call international, in the sense that when you go to those places where there's cultural barriers, if I was talking to you and I wasn't looking at you, it tells something. It's part of the body language thing we're talking about. He said something. He could say maybe that I am not so confident of myself or what I'm saying, or I am hiding something. So in order to not show any of those things and show that, okay, you know what you're doing and you want to communicate a particular message and you want the person you're talking to believe what you're saying, you look them in the eyes. And not just staring fixedly at me and like that, not just staring fixedly at me. You could look me in the eyes as you're saying your point, and then you could look everywhere else again and then come back to me. Yes, that makes it better.
Let's talk about listening now. How much is listening also a part of effective communication?
Listening is very important in communication, because if you don't hear what I'm saying, you can't reply me, or you can't give me the message or the reciprocate what I'm talking to you about. Listening is very important. Some people talk or communicate without listening. So when they do that, there's a big barrier, and I'm wondering, were you listening to what I was saying or not? Because your response is not what I expect. So you need to listen so that you can respond appropriately to the message or to the person who's talking to you or with you.
Now, but that also could, a lot of people could actually be looking at you and having eye contact and all of that and pretending to be listening to you. But there's also the problem of state of mind. If someone is listening to you but absent-mindedly, we don't say that it's listening, especially if you ask the person to give back the information you just gave, the person cannot give it back. Would you say that's listening?
No, you're trying to make a difference between hearing
and listening.
If you don't have a hearing problem, you probably hear everything that's been said around you. All the noise will go. So the mind has a way of sifting through the information that it gets and selectively choosing what it responds to. So in a communication scenario where the person receiving information understands the importance of the different aspects of the communication scene, then he will respond appropriately to what he should and, as it were, ignore what he should leave out. So listening and hearing, very important.
Now, both of you are BBC trained trainers, and you have been training broadcasters over the years in Nigeria. What would be your appraisal of the industry, especially when it has to do with the quality of broadcasters we have on air these days?
Well, what I've observed over the years is that many people come into broadcasting without training. That's a problem, because there are certain technicalities they need to appreciate in the use of the language in which they broadcast, that is English. So without training, one remains a potential for the job, no matter how long you experience. Because every now and then you get to embarrass yourself, your station, and the people you're communicating to. That's what we get in this country more often than not.
But what can you say, apart from the fact that training is quite a critical aspect of the job? What else can you say? Is it that people do not really pay attention to the ethics of the job? Or is it that there is a kind of non-challenge across board? I'm talking about the employers, the employee, and operators in the system.
Well, the people have different reasons for setting up stations. The professional aspect usually is ignored. It's the last thing they want to worry about. If you ask me, I think they're more concerned with making money. You hear people talk about the investor needs to recoup his investment, the money put into it. But that's unfortunate, because most stations that we know, the quality of the human capital in the business is most important. So training, the best ever. Now, let's take the English language, for example. English words have no meaning until you say them in certain ways. But in Nigeria, we don't seem to understand that. I say this, and I'm a Nigerian, so it's not as if I'm putting my people down. This is the fact. Most of the time, we say one thing, and it means the opposite, exact opposite. And broadcasters are guilty of it. The man in the street is also guilty of it. So what do we do in such a situation? In Nigeria, we want to follow the people as opposed to lead the people. They will tell you, oh, they will not understand if we speak in a certain way. But they should teach them. And if you ask me again, in this country, there was a time we heard education for about the year 2000, right? Okay, 2000. But this is 2013. It is not education for all. If we had education for about the year 2000, then there'd be no need to think they will not understand us if we speak impeccably. Now, the kind of standard English we're talking about. Now, we have gone down to their level by introducing pidgin. This is the most unfortunate thing that's happened in our country. I have zero tolerance for pidgin.
Some people have said that it's good for you to imbibe some of the culture You know, because it seems like everything we do is borrowed. It said that, I mean, are there specific shows that should be tailored to accept pigeons?
Tailored to accept pigeon?
Yes.
Everything we do?
Yes, hold on now. Let me come from what you said
Certain
about
shows
Certain radio shows and television
should be tailored to
for pigeons.
so that the people
Majority speak that language so they can
can understand, enjoy.
If you notice, the use of pidgin in the general sense, wherever it's used, is jocular, just to make people laugh, most of the time. That's why all our comedians have gravitated to that. They can't make a joke without interjecting pidgin. And they believe if you don't use pidgin, people won't laugh. It's very unfortunate, it's a lie. Now, you talked about borrowing. Everything we use borrowed. English is borrowed language. I don't agree with you. Listen, the world has become a global village. We're all singing it. But are we living with the understanding that the world is a global village? If it's global, there's only one standard for everything we do and everybody. In other words, if it's 100% here, that's 100% in America, 100% in Canada, 100% in France, 100% in Australia, 100% in India. That's the idea. But you want to say, oh, this is how we do it in Nigeria.
Okay, let me ask you, Mrs. Ofeli. Now, a lot of people, I've spoken to some graduates of mass communication, and they talked about Nigerian English. That actually some schools.
You studied Nigerian English. There is nothing like Nigerian English. No, English is English. There is nothing like
I throw you a challenge.
The accepted form of communication.
Let me throw you a challenge. If you can show me Russian Igbo, German Yoruba, then I will accept your Nigerian English. English is used practically all over the world. And people go to great lengths to acquire competence in English all over the world. In fact, we've heard Chinese, Japanese tell you they need to communicate with the rest of the world. They need to learn English. So we need to disabuse our minds in this country from such a thinking, right? Because English is used all over the world, and wherever it gets to, if they're not very competent in its use, they introduce features of their own language, and that they try to call their own English. No, it's just a substandard level of competence in the use of English. So with time, if they put in place structures and train the teachers so they can help all the people, then we'll have the same level of competence across board, everywhere we go. And they can learn from the broadcasters, which is what it's supposed to be. Every broadcaster should speak impeccable English, unfaultable.
Okay. even if the people may not understand.
No, they will understand.
They will learn.
See,
They will learn,
I've thrown another challenge to those who use pidgin. Give me an expression in pidgin that I cannot say in very simple English.
Hold into that. We'll invite a comedian who express himself in pidgin, invite him on the show, and we'll do something like that. See how
That's right. Show me.
And maybe sometime in the future we'll begin to write proposals in pidgin and apply for jobs in pidgin.
It's retrogressive.
That will be the day.
And I'm still wondering whether Nigeria is not the only country where a substandard language is used for broadcasts by way of pidgin. In fact, in some other countries, you'll be sued for misleading the people. And here we're complaining every year, massive failure in English language. WAEC NECO. It has to be.
Okay, we want to say thank you to both of you for joining us on the set this morning to talk about effective communication, of course, and the problems associated with that, with effective communications. We'll be talking to Mr. Sidney Ofeli and Mrs. Biola Ofeli, both of them of Speak Right, Sound Right Communications Finishing School, Lagos. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the rest of the show continues after a brief break.